Hello, my name is Mrs. Cadker and I'm Assistant Head Teacher at William Edwards School. Part of my remit is literacy and reading. Today's session is to offer some guidance and support to parents and carers and how they can support their children at home in developing their reading and literacy skills. So the purpose of today's session is to explore ways parents and carers can support and encourage reading at home, to explore ways that parents, carers can develop literacy at home, and ways to support children who are struggling to read fluently and understand what they have read. You will see here some statistics regarding the importance of reading and literacy and how this can impact a student's learning and life beyond. There is a range of different research that has been undertaken, especially since COVID, that shows the negative impact that it can have on students if they are unable to read fluently and understand what they have read. I'll give you a moment just to have a read of some of those statistics. Now, to go further here as well, here are some statistics that are quite sad to read, really, quite grim, because the story of reading and the pattern of reading that we have in schools is worsening since COVID. This is the research that was taken by GL Assessment, and it was from a range of over 300,000 schools. You can really see there the negative impact that COVID has had, and it has worsened the situation to one that we haven't seen before. So on average, 20% of all 15-year-old students have a reading age of 11 years or below, and 10% a reading age of 9 and below. Other statistics there you can see as well that there have been a 26% decrease in the number of children and young people aged 8 to 18 who read daily. This is a great concern. Obviously, as an English teacher, this is something that's quite close to my heart. But it has such a huge impact in a range of different subjects, not just in English. And it's about them being able to read carefully, but being able to read critically as well. And quite often you'll have students that are unable to read something and interpret it. So it's not just about understanding the words, but can they break it down and work out what is actually being suggested by a writer. It's particularly important in today's world when we're in an age of fake news and propaganda again, and especially knowing what is authentic, what is fact-checked, and being able to distinguish facts from fiction, actually. So this is something that has become prevalent in more so with the rise of certain media such as TikTok, that students need to be able to be critical and careful and active readers in order to fully understand the world in which they live. And sadly, since COVID, this has been getting much worse. So the Department for Education offer a number of different ways that you as parents and carers can support children at home. The key part of all of this is about making reading habitual. So it needs to be part of habit, the way that they would brush their teeth every morning, the way that they would wake up and have breakfast, whatever it might be, that it becomes part of their daily routine. If students were able to do that, then that's when they will make the most progress. So they offer 10 possible ways that you can support your children at home. And some of these are pretty obvious, but some of them are quite useful as well. So encourage your child to read aloud regularly. I'm going to be speaking quite a lot about this in a moment, about reading aloud with children. This is something that happens frequently at primary school, where you would often read with your children, especially when they're learning to read from the age of, say, 4 or 5 years old up until when they're around 8. Is that parents are very good at reading with their children. And what tends to happen around the age of 9, once they start reading independently, is that stops. I'm a parent myself as well, and I have a daughter that's 9 years old and a daughter that's 7. And even I must admit, with my 7-year-old, I would read more frequently with her, but my 9-year-old, I haven't done it as much as I used to. And actually, it's about making it habitual to reading aloud. That really helps with fluency, so for them to be able to read coherently and fluently, and that will help with their comprehension as well. Encourage reading choice as well, so it's not just reading books that are given to students, but for two children, for them to be able to recognise what genres they actually enjoy. Again, that's part of making reading habitual too. Create a comfortable environment, make use of your local library, talk about books, bring reading to life. I'm going to speak about that a little bit later. And making reading active as well. Again, I'll be speaking about that later. It's about making it contextualised, so bringing it into part of their world. they'll pick up good habits if they're able to do that. So here are some ways that we encourage reading at William Edwards. We have positive points on class charts. So if a student is reading aloud in class, or if they are seeing independent reading, then they are awarded positive points on class charts. I must say there's been some really lovely examples of students reading aloud in class recently. We've just started our novel study in Key Stage 3, and students are really engaged and really positive about wanting to read aloud, which is fantastic. And it's nice that they'll be awarded for that as well. So that reward is something that we really want to focus on as well. We also have a library service that's open twice a week. Again, students have responded very well to this. So they have an opportunity to go to the library during break one on Monday and Tuesday for them to be able to swap their books if they want to and borrow new books. We have recommended reading lists in Tutor, so books that are quite popular at the moment, or books that have been that were our Netflix series as well. They tend to be quite popular. In the English curriculum, we have recently changed our curriculum so that we have books that are more engaging and diverse and contemporary. There are some examples of books that we study. So Bone Sparrow, which is based on the refugee crisis. So it is a boy that is born into a refugee camp. Again, this is something that is happening in the world today, so students should be able to relate to this because they will hear about it on the news. Animal Farm, we've reintroduced this into the curriculum. In the world, as I said earlier on, about fake news and recognising fact and fiction, that it is crucial that students become critical readers. And Animal Farm explores some of those themes around fact versus fiction. Again, something that is needed with the rise in media, especially TikTok. And A Monster Calls, I'm not sure if you see the title there, it might be my face in the way. A Monster Calls as well is a text that we've just introduced this year, which deals around themes of family illness and how to build up resilience in times of difficulty. Now, I've looked at the range of guidance from the Department for Education and thought about, as a parent myself, realistically how much you can do. Many parents are incredibly busy, and so it can be quite difficult and seem quite laborious about where to even start and how much you should be doing, and realistically how much you can do with your child and how much you can read with the busy schedules that we all have. So on the slide now, you just see some quick wins. So these are just some of my suggestions of things that you can do quite easily in order to help your child at home. The first one would just be to read together for 15 minutes a night. It doesn't need to be many more than that, but even if it's Monday to Friday for 15 minutes where you read a paragraph and then your child will be able to hear the correct pronunciation of words, they'll be able to hear you reading fluently. You can stop at certain moments to check for understanding of certain words. And then also you'll hear your child read as well, so you'll be able to kind of flip between both of you, one you reading and then potentially child reading. Another one as well, which happens so often at primary school but is less common at secondary level, is rewarding reading. So if your child is reading 15 minutes a night, that they are rewarded in some way, whether it be to go to the library to pick a new book, whether it be to watch a series, whatever it might be. But again, this is something that happens at primary school. My daughters, as I spoke to earlier on, they get to make biscuits on a Friday if they've been reading for 3 times a week. And that's an incentive for them to read. And this is something we need to do more of at secondary. And it can be quite difficult in schools because biscuits on a Friday is not going to cut it with 15-year-olds. But you know your children, you'll know the way that they would respond to a reward in some way. And if they were rewarded for reading, it can be a great incentive. Another one is family book clubs, especially with older siblings and cousins. So if they have an older cousin that's reading this particular book, as long as it's age appropriate, it would be worthwhile for the same for your child to be reading those books, and then they've got something in common, something they can discuss as well. This fourth bullet point is about having subtitles on. Now, I know some families will do this regularly anyway. I have to admit, I have to have subtitles on, otherwise I can't actually hear what's being said on the screen. But subtitles on has been proven statistically to make a huge difference to students and about exposing them to quite challenging vocabulary. So for example, you can see on the slide there, you've got a picture and with the subtitles on Netflix. And it says increasingly intensifying ominous music. Now, students will at that time read those subtitles and they'll also hear the music, and they'll then be able to contextualize and identify those words with the music. So for example, the word ominous is used there, so being quite mysterious and quite eerie. This is a word that we quite frequently use when we're describing atmosphere in English. So when we might be speaking about the beginning of a play, for example, if we're looking at Macbeth and it does start with thunder and lightning and it creates that ominous atmosphere, if students were to recognise this on Netflix and then they can transfer that into the classroom, it's increasing their vocabulary. So it does make a huge difference if you're able to put subtitles on. And as I say, Netflix is particularly good for this. I know some people hate them, but it can make a big difference. And another quick win as well was on Google. They have a word of the day app or a notification. So you can set up on Google, click notifications and click word of the day. And it just pops up as a notification on your phone every morning. It'll be a certain word. Again, it's just about trying to expose students to a wider range of vocabulary that can help in their reading. It might be something worthwhile to look at too. Now, our second objective today was to explore ways that parents and carers can develop literacy at home. Now, reading, we've just given you some examples. For literacy, it's all intertwined, it all goes hand in hand. So if we're looking particularly at literacy, is the ability to read, write, speak and listen in a way that lets us communicate effectively and make sense of the world. But it is all intertwined. So if you are reading aloud with children at home, this will obviously help their reading. It will help their speaking and listening skills because they will hear you read, then they will read themselves, and you can communicate that way verbally. It also improves their writing as well. So if they are reading words in sentences and seeing the correct use of spelling, punctuation and grammar, that will then should transfer into their own writing. So the importance of reading, it does hugely impact their overall literacy skills as well. So I've given you some statistics at the beginning of today's session that said that about 20% of 15-year-olds have a reading age of 11 years and below. This is something that many parents will face, and it is children who struggle with reading fluency and comprehension. So you have some students where it might be that they just don't read much at all, but some students potentially will not read much at all because they struggle, they find it difficult. It can be incredibly overwhelming to have a book in front of you with hundreds of words. If you don't really understand what those words mean, it can make it incredibly difficult, and that's where some students will become quite resistant and reluctant readers because they find it challenging. So there are a number of different ways that I'm going to suggest today about how you can help your children if they are struggling with reading fluency, so reading fluently and then being able to understand and comprehend what they've read. There is a link here that I will post with this PowerPoint, and it is through Teams. So the app Teams, it is a function called Read in Progress. There is a link on YouTube. It's a 3-minute link that goes through a new program. In the program, through Teams, you will upload an extract or you upload a book like a PDF. And then you get your child to read the text aloud from the app. So they read it aloud. They can do this on their phone as well. So they read the text aloud, and then it will determine the fluency. So they're given a percentage. So if they were fluent with 78% of the words, it will then tell you which words the student struggled with. And then you can then pinpoint those particular words and go through them with your child as well. This is has potential to be fantastic, and it could be quite revolutionary actually, because it is useful for students if English is a second language. So it gives you the option to translate into different languages. It gives you the option to focus on particular words. So if you click on it, like you would with a Kindle, if you click on the word, it gives you other words that are similar, so synonyms. It will also give pictures. So if you have students that are more visual, students with special educational needs, they can see those words with pictures as well. So it can be, as I say, it could be something quite great for parents to use, and teachers will be using this in the next year as well. The link to that I will put alongside this PowerPoint so you can watch that clip. It's 3 minutes on YouTube. It's very simple, but as I say, it could be something that could make a huge difference if your child is struggling to read at home. The second bullet point there is about decoding, and the third one's about contextualising, which I'll go on to now. So when you are reading with your child, you're going to come across really challenging vocabulary. So one of the key ways that you can use to build up their resilience towards difficult vocabulary is to break down the word into morphemes. So morphemes are parts of words. So like the prefix at the beginning, the root word in the middle, the suffix at the end. Rather than just telling the student, right, this word means this, that's not going to, they're not going to be able to remember that straight away. If you just tell something once, it's not going to go into their long-term memory. However, if you were to break down the word, then it should encourage students to do the same when they are approached with difficult vocabulary. If they get into the habit of breaking down the words if they're struggling, rather than just saying, I don't understand that word, that actually if they break it down, it will help them to try and decode and contextualise what the word means. For example, you have here two sentences. The average reading age that would be needed in order to understand all of the words in those two sentences are around the ages of about 12 to 14. So it might seem quite simple to most parents, but actually there's some quite challenging vocabulary there. Now, for example, if a student didn't understand the word misjudged in that first sentence, that will impact their understanding of the entire sentence. So just by having one word where they don't necessarily understand what that one word means, they're going to struggle with the whole sentence, and that therefore becomes a block to their understanding. That means that they're unable to comprehend and understand what they've read. And this does happen in exams as well, where it could be just one word that they don't understand the meaning of in that sentence. They can understand everything else, but that one word will stop them and be a barrier to their learning and their understanding. So, for example, you've got the first sentence, which is the coach had to rethink his strategy after the team misjudged their opponents, hoping to decrease errors and secure a stronger defence. So you can see there's a wide range of vocabulary being used in this sentence. If we were to look at the first words, you've got the coach had to rethink his strategy. Now, most students will know what rethink means. But if they were to know that the prefix re, it means to do again. So if you're having to think again, by students knowing that the prefix re means again, that's going to help in their understanding when they come across other words that start with re. So if it's a more challenging word that they've come across, like rejuvenate, for example, they're not necessarily going to know the meaning of that word. But if they know that the prefix re means again, that will then help them to understand more challenging vocabulary later on. If we were then to look at misjudged, again, the prefix mis means, not mistake, it means error. It can also mean bad or wrong, so like the word mischievous, or if you had the word misunderstood, or if you had the word misquoted. So it means bad or wrong. So if they were to know that that means wrong, misjudged means to judge something wrongly. So again, when they come across this word, when they come across this prefix, if they were then able to use that knowledge of that prefix to then understand what another word means, that one is more challenging, it's going to help them in their wider vocabulary. There's over 5 million words in the dictionary, including morphemes, so prefixes and suffixes. Can't teach all of them. But if we can develop their skills where they understand the meaning of certain prefixes and suffixes, it can help them understand later on, especially when they're approached with difficult vocabulary. Again, you've got here you have the word decrease. D means to go down, to decline. So most students will know what decrease means, but if they were to come across a word that is more challenging in the exam, debilitating, for example, if they know that D means down, that's going to help them to understand what those words mean too. Okay. Now, these are available online. These are some of the most frequently used affixes, so prefixes and suffixes that are used in the English language. It doesn't fit all. We're a hybrid language from influences around the world that I don't need to go into now, but there's some information there if you're a bit of a geek like me and like to learn about etymology and about the origins of words. But this does fit for 65% of the most commonly used suffixes in the English language. These are your top ones. So common prefixes are on the top right there. They occur in 58% of 3,000 words in textbooks. And then you've got common suffixes, so at the end of the word as well. It would be worthwhile, if your child is struggling to read, is to look at some of the resources that are available online. And I will be uploading some resources alongside this PowerPoint for you to see potentially what prefixes it's worthwhile teaching to students and to your child explicitly, so they'll be able to decode quite challenging vocabulary, especially in exams. And speaking of exams, I just wanted to show why this is so important as well. You can see on the slide now, these are some questions, and these are just random questions that I pulled up from GCSE past papers from a range of different subjects. And these are questions that students will be faced with in exams. They will have words, they will have vocabulary that's going to be incredibly difficult. And it can be really quite frustrating as well for students, as I said earlier on, when it might be one word that they don't understand in a sentence. They can understand every single other word being used, but that one word is the thing that stops them from being able to answer that question. So again, it's about them learning and building up the resilience to break down words and to decode them and contextualize them within the sentence in order to be able to understand them. And it is a skill to be able to do that. It's about being a good reader as well. So if I just give one of these as an example, you can see here, like construction, it says a drawback, to describe one possible benefit and one possible drawback. That's not really a word that you'd use verbally. As I say, I don't think I'd ever use it with my children. So it might be that they're approached with that word for the first time in an exam. So if they don't know that a drawback means a disadvantage, some students that are not resilient readers will ignore that question. And I say this from experience as an English teacher. Rather than students trying to work out from the rest of the sentence what that one word might mean, they see that one word and they move on because they say they don't understand the question. But it's about trying to get children to read the rest of the sentence and say, well, actually, it says in this sentence that a benefit, it says that one possible benefit and then one possible drawback. By contextualising in that sentence where it's got benefit, which they'll probably know the meaning of that word, well, that must be something good. A drawback must be something bad. By them just looking at that one word outside of the context of the sentence, they're not going to potentially know what that word means. But if they were to contextualise it within the sentence, that's a benefit, therefore this must be a negative, it must be a disadvantage, then they can work it out. Another example, so here in the sociology question, it's using words like conventional family, patriarchal. Now this is quite subject-specific terminology, so it's likely they'll know that patriarchal means that it's a male-dominated society, but they might not necessarily know what conventional means. So again, they're going to have to read the sentence to work out, okay, patriarchal means male-dominated society or male-dominated family. If it's male-dominated, maybe that means traditional. So they're going to have to contextualise it within the whole sentence in order to be able to understand. Another example here, definition, again, they'll probably understand that from PE to define something. But justification, do they know that justification means to explain what their reasonings are? If they don't understand what justify means, they're not going to be able to answer that question in an effective way. Okay. Now, as I've mentioned earlier on about the most common prefixes and suffixes, this is on the last slide of this presentation. We will also, I'll also include this in additional resources alongside this PowerPoint as well. So that is the end of the presentation. Thank you so much if you've managed to stay for the 25 minutes. I hope this has been useful. As I say again, my name is Mrs. Kadka and my role here is reading and literacy. If you have any other questions or if you require any further support, then please email the school's main office, which is office@wes.swesit.org. If you were to do that, then I can contact and offer any guidance and any other suggestions that I have for helping your child to read at home. Thank you very much for listening.